I'm 90 years old, and if you sat me down across a table and asked me what I'd do differently, I wouldn't talk about regrets the way most people do. I'd talk about clarity. Because the truth is, most of the pain I went through didn't come from bad luck. It came from not knowing what actually mattered. And I learned a couple of these lessons the hard way. I paid for them with time, with stress, with relationships, and sometimes with money. And I don't want you to go through that. So let's just sit down for a minute. No fluff, no theory. Just real advice from someone who's been around long enough to see how things actually play out. The first thing I would tell my younger self is this. Be very careful who you talk to about your money. And I don't mean you should be secretive or paranoid. I mean you should understand that money conversations almost never go the way you think they will. When two people sit down and start comparing salaries or savings, one person usually walks away feeling smaller. Maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's insecurity, maybe it's quiet resentment, but it's there. And once it's there, it doesn't just disappear. When I was younger, I thought being open about money made me honest. I thought it built trust. But what I didn't realize is that it also created comparisons. And comparisons change relationships. Now, there are people who need to know your numbers. If you're working with a financial advisor, if you're getting a mortgage, if you're planning your estate, those are need-to-know situations. That's different. That's professional. But casually sharing what you make or what you've saved, there's very little upside and a lot of potential downside. So if I could go back, I'd keep that circle tight, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. The next thing I learned, and this one can really hurt you if you get it wrong, is don't tell people your plans too early, especially when it comes to quitting your job or making a big life move. I've seen this happen more times than I can count. Someone gets frustrated at work, they start thinking about leaving, and they confide in a coworker. Maybe they trust them, maybe they just need to vent. But what they don't realize is that information has power. The moment someone else knows you're thinking about leaving, you've lost a bit of control. That information can spread, it can reach the wrong ears, and suddenly you're not the one deciding your timeline anymore. I remember a man I worked with, smart guy, hardworking. He mentioned to someone that he was thinking about retiring in a couple of years, just thinking out loud, nothing set in stone. Well, word got around, and before he knew it, management started planning around his departure. Responsibilities shifted, opportunities stopped coming his way, and eventually they gave him a timeline, one that worked for them, not for him. He didn't leave on his terms. He was eased out. That's what happens when you give away your leverage too early. Now, I'm not saying you should never share your plans. There's a right time for that, when you're ready, when your ducks are in a row, when you've thought it through. But until then, keep it close. The third thing I wish I understood earlier is about control, specifically giving it away too easily. And one of the biggest ways people do this is through legal and financial authority. Now, I'm not an attorney, and this isn't legal advice, but I've seen enough to tell you this. Be extremely careful who you give decision-making power over your life. I'm talking about things like power of attorney, access to accounts, the ability to sign documents on your behalf. In the right situation, with the right person, these tools are necessary. If something happens to you, someone needs to step in. But I've seen people hand over that control too casually, often to family members, thinking, well, I trust them. And trust is important, but trust without structure, that's where problems begin. Because people change when responsibility and money enter the picture, not always in bad ways, but sometimes in ways you didn't expect. If I could go back, I would make sure that every decision like that was guided by someone whose only job was to protect my interests. Not a friend's attorney, not a relative's suggestion. My own advisor, my own legal counsel. Because once you give that kind of control away, getting it back isn't always easy.
Now, the fourth lesson. This one is more subtle but can create a lot of unnecessary trouble in your life. Be very careful about expressing negative opinions about people, especially in the wrong circles. I'm talking about your boss, your coworkers, even neighbors or acquaintances. It feels harmless, doesn't it? You're just venting. You're just being honest. Maybe you're talking to someone you trust.
But the problem is, words travel. And once they leave your mouth, you don't control where they go or how they're repeated. I've seen careers damaged, not because someone did poor work, but because something they said in a private moment made its way back to the wrong person. And here's the thing. People are human, even bosses, even leaders. They have egos, they have emotions, and when they hear that someone dislikes them or disrespects them, it changes how they see that person. Not always consciously, but it happens. So what I would tell my younger self is this: choose your circle wisely. If you need to talk to someone who truly has your back, a spouse, a very close friend, someone who understands discretion. But don't let those thoughts float around in places where they can come back to hurt you. Because most of the time, there's no upside to sharing them publicly, only risk. Now, the fifth lesson. This one is a little more complicated, and I want to be careful how I say it. It's about personal struggles, especially mental and emotional ones. There's a balance here. On one hand, I believe there shouldn't be shame around facing challenges. Life is hard. Everyone goes through something at some point, and getting help is one of the smartest things you can do. But on the other hand, the world doesn't always respond to that information in a fair or understanding way, and that's just reality. If you share certain struggles in the wrong environment, especially professional ones, it can change how people perceive your reliability, your stability, your capability. Is that right? No, but it happens. So what I would tell my younger self is this: be intentional about who you open up to. Talk to professionals, talk to people you trust deeply, get the support you need, but don't feel like you owe the world your story. Because not everyone knows how to handle it, and not everyone will respond in a way that helps you. And that's something I had to learn through experience. Now, before I go on to the next set of lessons, let me say this. None of this is about becoming closed off or distrustful. It's about being thoughtful. It's about understanding that information, what you share, when you share it, and with whom, is one of the most powerful tools you have. And if you use it wisely, it can protect your peace, your opportunities, and your future. If you use it carelessly, it can create problems you never saw coming. I've got more to share with you, lessons that took me decades to fully understand, and a few that completely changed how I see life, money, and relationships.
All right, let's keep going. Now, the next thing I would sit my younger self down and really make sure he understands is this. Stop trying to impress people. I know that sounds simple, almost too simple, but I'm telling you, this one cost me years. When you're young, you think people are watching you closely. You think they're judging your car, your clothes, your job title, your house. And so you start making decisions not based on what's right for you, but based on what will look good to other people. I did it. Bought things I didn't need, took on responsibilities I didn't even want, said yes to opportunities that looked impressive on the outside, but drained me on the inside. And here's what I learned after decades of doing that. Most people aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. They're thinking about themselves. And the few who are paying attention, their opinions don't shape your life nearly as much as your decisions do. So if I could go back, I'd ask myself a simple question before every major decision. Would I still do this if nobody ever found out? If the answer was no, I'd walk away. Because chasing approval is a race you never win. There's always someone with more, someone doing better, someone getting more attention. But when you start making decisions based on your values instead of other people's expectations, something changes. You feel lighter, clearer, more in control. Now, the next lesson, this one might be one of the most important. Take care of your health early, not later. I know. Everybody says that. It sounds like advice you've heard 100 times. But the reason you keep hearing it is because it's true in a way you don't fully understand until it's too late. When you're young, your body forgives you. You can eat poorly, sleep less, ignore stress, and still feel fine. But what you don't see is the accumulation. It's like interest but working against you. The habits you build in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, they don't show their full impact until your 60s, 70s, and beyond. And by then, you're not building anymore. You're managing damage. I've sat with people who would trade every dollar they have just to feel good again, just to wake up without pain, just to have energy. And the hard truth is, money can solve a lot of problems, but it can't buy back lost health. So if I could go back, I wouldn't wait for a wake-up call. I wouldn't wait for a diagnosis. I'd treat my health like an investment from day one. Because in the end, it's not just about living longer, it's about living better. Now, the next thing I learned, and this one surprised me when I finally understood it, not every opportunity is worth taking. When you're younger, you think the goal is to say yes. Say yes to everything, more opportunities, more connections, more chances to get ahead. And for a while, that works. But eventually what happens is your life gets crowded. Too many commitments, too many responsibilities, too many directions pulling you at the same time, and you start to lose focus. I remember a period in my life where, on paper, everything looked great. I was busy, I was involved, I had multiple things going on. But inside, I felt scattered, stretched thin, constantly behind. That's when I realized something. Every yes is a no to something else. When you say yes to something that doesn't truly matter, you're saying no to your time, your energy, your peace, and often to the things that actually do matter. So if I could go back, I wouldn't just ask, is this a good opportunity? I'd ask, is this the right opportunity for me right now? And if it wasn't a clear yes, I'd have the courage to say no. That's something that takes time to learn. But once you do, it changes everything. Now, this next lesson, this one is deeply personal. Don't wait too long to spend time with the people you love. Because here's something no one really prepares you for. Time moves faster than you think. When you're young, it feels like you have all the time in the world. You assume there will always be another holiday, another visit, another conversation. But life doesn't always work that way. People move, relationships change, and sometimes people are gone before you're ready. I've had moments, quiet moments, where I wished I had just one more conversation with someone, one more afternoon, one more chance to say something I didn't say, and you don't get that back. So if I could go back, I wouldn't delay those moments. I wouldn't let work or busyness or distractions take priority over the people who truly matter. Because at the end of your life, it's not your achievements you think about most. It's your relationships. It's the people. Now, the next lesson, this one might save you years of frustration. Learn how to be comfortable being alone. Not lonely, alone. There's a difference. If you're not comfortable with yourself, you'll constantly look for distractions. You'll fill your time with noise, with people, with activity, anything to avoid being still. And when you do that, you lose something important. You lose clarity. Some of the best decisions I ever made came from quiet moments. No outside opinions, no pressure, just me thinking things through. But that only happens when you're okay sitting with yourself. So if I could go back, I'd spend less time trying to escape silence and more time learning from it. Because that's where you start to understand who you really are and what you actually want. Now, I want to share one more before we wrap this up. And this one might be the simplest of all, but also one of the hardest to live by. Be patient. Not passive, not inactive. Patient. We live in a world where everything feels urgent. Faster is better, quicker results, quicker progress, quicker success. But most of the things that truly matter in life, they take time. Building wealth takes time. Building relationships take time. Building a meaningful life takes time. And when you rush those things, you make mistakes. I made them. I wanted results too quickly. I made decisions without fully thinking them through. I chased shortcuts. And almost every time, it cost me more in the long run. So if I could go back, I'd remind myself that progress isn't always visible right away. That just because something is slow doesn't mean it's not working. Consistency over time, that's where the real results come from.
Now, let me leave you with this. If you take nothing else from what I've said, remember this one idea. Your life is shaped less by big, dramatic moments and more by small, consistent decisions. What you do daily, what you tolerate, what you prioritize, what you ignore, it all adds up. And one day you wake up and you're 90 years old, looking back. The goal isn't to be perfect, it's to be intentional. Because when you're intentional, you don't just drift through life, you build something you can actually be proud of. So, those are the lessons I would give my younger self. Hard-earned, sometimes painful, but incredibly valuable. If you got something out of this, there's another video I'd recommend you watch next, the one the algorithm is putting in front of you right now. Thanks for spending this time with me. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.